For me, family is everything. My genetic family, as well as my chosen family, has shaped me into the person I am today. The support from my family has allowed me to be confident in my endeavors and have access to endless opportunities.
I have always been aware that there are children in this world that will never be given the opportunities that I was given, and for this reason, I have always wanted to adopt a child. When I was little, I said I wanted to adopt because it would guarantee that I had a girl. Now, however, 10 years later, I still want to adopt, and I specifically want to adopt an Indian female orphan.
India is home to 31 million orphans, with the large majority of them being female. Female orphans are also highly susceptible to child trafficking, childhood marriage, and malnourishment.
Over the last few years, I have come to know about the disproportionate number of female orphans in India, and I knew that one day when I was able, I could give one of those girls a more secure life. I have also had several family members and family friends adopt from India.
The stories of adopters deserve to be recognized. That is why my research question came to be: what are the experiences and motivations of second generation American Indian mothers when adopting female orphans from India? For comparison purposes, I also decided to interview non-Indian heritage American mothers who had also adopted a female orphan from India. In the end, I interviewed 5 non-Indian heritage mothers and 6 Indian heritage mothers. While my Indian heritage participants were all found through personal connections, my non-Indian heritage participants were found when I requested to access several private Facebook groups. Here, parents of adopted Indian children find support and help each other with the process of adoption and raising their children.
Because I wanted my participants to share their stories freely, I opted for semi-structured interviews while trying to get a full picture of their experiences.
Tanya is a single mother of 2 adopted girls, both adopted from India. Tanya was born in France and then moved to the United States as a teenager. Her family has lived in many places around the globe. Her mom worked in orphanages in Southeast Asia when her grandfather was stationed in Vietnam. In the United States, she was raised by a single mother and her grandmother. Prior to having Tanya, Tanya's mother attempted to adopt 3 times. Tanya said that she has always been comfortable with the topic of adoption because of her mother. Hearing about adoption from my mom probably made an impact. Adoption has always been a conversation. I have also always had family in different places. Tanya ultimately decided to adopt a girl from India. When looking at the qualifications and the places I could adopt as a single mother, it came down to China and India. India has always been a country I have been fascinated by. I love the food and the culture. Linda is another mother who lives in the Midwest. She attributes her decision to adopt based on her personal values of compassion and helping others. Linda's child suffers from hearing loss. When I couldn't get pregnant, I started thinking about adoption. I always had a soft spot for children, and I knew that places like China and India had lots of children in need of adoption.
While doing these interviews brought me so much joy, I could not find any apparent pattern on why these mothers wanted to adopt Indian female orphans. That was until I started interviewing the Indian heritage mothers.
Preeti is an Indian American mother residing in California. Her parents immigrated from Singapore in the 80s. Her and her husband decided to start the process of adopting in 2015. For Preeti, the process of adopting was long. She had to get police reports, letters of referral, and get a psychologist clearance. She experienced hurdles getting her OCI, or Overseas Citizenship of India, which was a certification that would grant her and her husband some priority when adopting. She noted she had a small preference for adopting a girl because she had no sisters and had always wanted a girl in the family. In talking about her decision to adopt, she said, "Adopting a girl happened to be a benefit. I knew about the village times and girls were not considered part of the family. I knew it was a good opportunity to give a girl a better life." These village times were in reference to the unwanted attitude towards girls that usually occurred in poorer areas of India. Girls are sometimes considered financial burdens, and economic pressures in these areas contributes to the high number of female orphans in the adoption system. Amrita is another Indian mother who lives in the Midwest. She began thinking about adoption in 1999. For her, adopting from India was an easy choice. 1. We could adopt a child of the same culture. 2. It was a closed adoption. Amrita also knew she wanted to adopt a girl. The one aspect I hated of Indian culture is the belief that girls are not as valued as boys. I really wanted to give the opportunity to a girl.
After looking through all of my interviews with the Indian American mothers, the pattern became apparent. Aside from other individual motivations, all of the Indian American mothers had a feminist sentiment. They expressed their desire to give the opportunity to specifically a girl.
From my findings, I propose that the cultural factor in the motivation to adopt for the Indian American mothers I interviewed stems from two aspects. One, a feminist value that comes from changing gender roles as the family immigrates from India to the United States. And two, an awareness or a cultural consciousness of the patriarchal history that leads to many females being in the adoption system. In this project, I used the definition of a value as described by anthropologist Daniel Souleles. Souleles defines a value as what individuals or groups of people deem worthwhile and how they turn those into actions. In this case, the value of feminism is turned into the action of international adoption. This personal feminist value can be traced back to another pattern in the backgrounds of the Indian American mothers. They were all raised in the United States by an immigrant mother. Many studies have been done based on passing down values from an immigrant mother to an American-born Indian child. One study found that mothers tended to break away from traditional values and encourage their daughters to marry later in life and be financially independent. Another found that second-generation Indian Americans have more liberal views in terms of gender norms. In her article, Conceptualizing Indian Diaspora, Amba Pandey describes a homeland consciousness, which can exist in the form of a social, political, or economic involvement through various networks. In this case, the social involvement is international adoption from India. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace also conducted a survey that asked Indian Americans how connected they feel to their homeland. It was found that Indian Americans overwhelmingly still felt connections to their homeland. All of the Indian mothers who were interviewed had a collective knowledge of the negative gender bias towards females in India. This understanding is a consciousness of India's history that can be described through cultural consciousness. The main idea is that culture does play a role in family building. The Indian American mothers all had a cultural motivation that led them to specifically adopt their female child from India. Therefore, same-culture adoption in this case is highly motivated by cultural factors. UNICEF and UNESCO estimate that 153 million children are orphans, 168 million children are engaged in child labor, and 263 million children are out of school. India's orphans make up 20% of the orphan population worldwide. My participants and their stories have inspired me and showed me that they are kind and loving people who dedicate years of their lives to giving a child a better life.
Many of us are able to change the life of a child. I urge anyone thinking about having children to consider adoption.